welcome to that Bible Guy. Are you a Christian who's discouraged by disunity? Well, what we have today is two simple solutions to deal with disunity. And what I want to look at today is two things that we can focus on whenever that is what you're actually dealing with. Two specific things today that we can focus on. And I talked about one of these recently in a sermon. Well, we all know, if you've looked into Christianity, that it's all too common that you will see divisions, schisms, and the people dividing over things that you would not really believe are possible. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, and it wasn't Jesus' prayer, but the history of Christianity is full of divisions, people dividing over multiple things where they just could not get their differences resolved. So why disunity? Why am I talking about that? Why focus on things to help us with that? Well, to be honest right now, we are surrounded by it, and even in our own local fellowship. So the International Churches of Christ, previously Churches of Christ as well, and also specifically even within the UK right now, where we always thought you may hear in a distance that there's disunity. People don't agree on things, not on the same trajectory, but it's happened even close to home now. And when that starts to happen, that can definitely be a challenge. And the reason I look at this today is, and I know many of us may feel this way or may have moments where you've felt this way, is this can influence everything, because the whole issue of a brother or sister who's not on the same path as you going in a different direction, maybe speaking against what you say, or you're speaking against what they say, and all of a sudden it's not making the gospel attractive, and so you're fearful of this, this can be all consuming. And this is why I look at it today. Two things, simple things to focus on for us personally, mainly to deal with disunity, because it can become all consuming. And I've found this myself of recent times. I've found myself going down rabbit holes of things that I could look into in an attempt to try and deal with the fact that there are differences. But what can I focus on in the midst of that really helps? What I just want to say is what I'm not saying today. I'm not saying that we shouldn't actively try to deal with disunity. We shouldn't try to bring groups together, that we shouldn't try to harmonize our views, that we shouldn't have discussions about what the differences are, that we shouldn't pray about these issues. We obviously should do those things as well. But I want to just look into a couple of scriptures today that I think have two simple solutions whenever we're dealing with that disunity, which can become all consuming. Mark 5, which we're going through the Gospel of Mark right now, 5 verse 18. This is the man who's demon possessed, who lived in the cave, who was too strong to be subdued, who came up to Jesus, and Jesus sent a legion of demons out of him into a herd of pigs. And I dealt with that strange situation on Sunday with the questions that arises. But in verse 18, the man wants to go with Jesus, but Jesus doesn't let him. And in verse 18, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he's had mercy on you." The man went out and spoke in the Decapolis, the 10 cities. So he did more than he was asked to do. But this man had wanted to go with Jesus, and Jesus didn't let him. He could have been the 13th apostle. He could have had a gospel about him that he wrote himself. And yet Jesus didn't let him go. This guy could have been aggrieved. "You've left me with a people that wanted you to leave the region. They don't even get you, Jesus. They're divided about you compared to me. And you've sent this herd of pigs into a bank, water that drowned, and now they're going to be even more against me, and you won't let me go with you. I can be more effective. Why won't you let me go, Jesus?" But I want to look at what Jesus asked him to go and do. He asked him to go and share with his family, but he says, share what? He says, share how he's had mercy on you. And what I think is, what we need to do, what this man needed to do in a situation that could have been difficult, even though he had been healed. He could have had many questions and issues about why Jesus left him like that for so long, why he had to go and seek Jesus, why he was left in that region of all regions, and why he wasn't able to be an apostle, etc., etc. But he wanted the man to go away, share in the unique part of the world that he could have the most effect, and that was more necessary, testify first-hand evidence of evidence about Jesus. But he wanted him to focus on the mercies that had been given to him. So when he was surrounded by potentially difficult or unusual times where people were divided, he was to focus on God's mercies to him. So we can see that. That's the first thing to say is, and that's same for us. focus on God's mercies. Be aware of the things that God has done in our life that we want to share about. So in other words, rather than having our mind consumed by all the disunity, we want it to be consumed by the mercy that God has shown us. The second thing I see from this passage that he's also asked to do, the second thing, simple thing that we can focus on, is that Jesus asked him to go and do something. So he says in verse 19, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you. I want us to focus on this for a moment, because whenever times are hard or trying, or we're confused and we don't know what we're doing and we don't know why God's allowing something, I believe that sometimes God's used this method. Jesus uses it here, and we're going to see another example now, where they're asked to go and do something. The man was to focus on what God had asked him to do, what Jesus had asked him to do. And in this situation, it was to go and share. Your task, Jesus gave him a task, he needed to fulfill it, is go and share. And he shared more than he was supposed to. We see this also in the life of Elijah. Elijah was very discouraged in 1 Kings 19. He sat down and wanted to die, despite the fact that he had an incredible victory. And God had to work with Elijah, even though he didn't think there was anyone else out there that was faithful. Ever felt that way? No one else is faithful. It's just me. It's so discouraging. And yet before God tells him that there's actually 7,000 other prophets like you, before he even tells him that, look at what he does. You can read about how discouraged he is in 1 Kings 19, 1-5. But God speaks to him in verse 15 and says, the Lord said to him, to Elijah, go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel. And anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel Molech, the Syrian prophet. And then at the end of verse 18, yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him. So before God even tells him that you're wrong, there are other prophets that are faithful. Just after he encouraged them with food and water here as well, just before this. But in order to encourage Elijah in his moment of despair, when it said, as I say, he wanted to die, it says in verse 4 that he prayed that he might die. But God's way of encouraging him was to do what? Give him a task. Go off and anoint a new king, Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel. You got a Hazael, king over Aram. Anoint Elisha. He's got all this work to do. So why do I say this today? Well, I say this because this is what helped me in dealing with all the stuff that was going on out there, and how much should I get involved in this? How do I feel about this? Why has God let this happen? I thought God has asked me to do two things. He's asked the demon-possessed man, Elijah was asked to do this. He's asked me, focus on my mercies. So when I say this, I don't mean just think about it. I mean the predominant state, the default state, regardless of what's going on around us, is focus on God's mercies. That's the first thing. Focus on his mercies to us. How has he blessed me? How has he demonstrated mercy to me? Regardless of what's going on around me. The second thing is, what has he asked me to do? He has a role for me to fulfill, regardless of how disunified our movement is, our church is, our group is, our local group is. He's still got a task for me. And in both these tasks, they were to go off and do God's work. What has God asked us to do? He's asked every Christian to go and share. That'll come from being aware of all his mercies towards us. So hopefully you can think about these things today. Two simple solutions to deal with disunity. The first one is that we have a mind that's dominated by knowing about God's mercy towards us. The second thing is that we focus on what has God specifically and generally asked us, each of us individually, what has he asked us to go and do? I hope some of this has helped us today. I hope maybe to do some more videos on this particular topic. If you've liked it, please hit the like button. Please share this on for other people. Please subscribe to that Bible Guy if you haven't already, and let's get his word out there.